Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the book launch of the CISO's Guide to DevSecOps in the Enterprise. My name is Kevin Boots. I'm a senior DevOps consultant at DevOn, and I will be your host for today's live stream. We will be interviewing some of the digital experts in the field of digital security at this session. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, please put them in the chat. We will try to pick some out and ask them during this session. I won't be interviewing them alone, however. I'm joined by my co-host Irfan. Irfan, welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for being here. My name is Irfan, and as you guys might have already seen, I'm one of the co-authors, together with Rahul Shah and Marcus van Duin, of the book that we're launching today. I'm very happy that I'm accompanied with some of the chapter authors as well.
Yes, speaking of the chapter authors, thank you for being here as well. I'll do a quick introduction. First up, we have Tom Moekotte, who is ISO at Royal Haskoning. We have Frans van Kessel, Chief Digital Officer at APG. We have Willem van der Valk, ex-CISO at Achmea and now working for ERA NEOS. And we have Ori Vrachtman, CISO at Hapag-Lloyd. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here and welcome. So, talking about the book, Irfan, you co-wrote this together with Marcus and Rahul. What was the reason for writing this book in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, to be very honest, this is the first time in my life I wanted to have a book with my name on it. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. That's just joking. I've been part of multiple implementation of secure DevOps in larger organizations, and what I found, and having conversation with multiple professionals in the field, I found that the focus of implementation of secure DevOps was mostly technical, and I don't think that you can be successful without the technical aspects, so you definitely need that angle. But it's also very important to have the organizational angle as well. And then nobody can tell you that story better than executives, right? So that's why we have, created a book with point of views from executives from the field that know how to navigate the change through an organization. And that was one of the reasons why I found it important to write such a book.
All right, thank you very much. And we already discussed right before having this live stream a little bit about the name DevSecOps. It's quite a loaded term. Can you go a little bit into what the difference for, as a conclusion to the book at least, what was the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps to you?
Yeah, so this is a loaded discussion. We had quite some fun conversations with the chapter authors when we were composing the book with the same question, right? Is there any difference between DevOps and DevSecOps? I think there can be a case made, right? If you look at the term sec itself, within the title, it adds to it. It really says we're focusing on security additionally. But if you look at the point of view of a few of the executives, including mine, right, I don't feel that security needs to be a separate thing within DevOps. So for me, I don't see any difference in DevSecOps versus DevOps, but it does help having those conversations within your organization to pay extra attention to security within DevOps. And I do also feel that it is important to pay attention, separate attention to ensure security happens within DevOps compared to any sort of IT methodology that you have applied, whether it's Agile, Waterfall, it doesn't matter, right? Because the way you do IT changes, and you have to consider changing the way you do security to make it happen.
All right, thank you very much. So, first up, this is to all of you, of course, congratulations on the book, and thank you again for your contributions to it. I want to ask some questions to you in terms of what your experiences are on top of what you've already shared in the book, of course. So perhaps if I start with you, Willem, I would like to ask you, what made you make the move to DevSecOps, or why would you say companies need to move there in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and also for having me here today. I think for me, it didn't start by introducing DevSecOps, because I think what we did, like security work within Achmea for all kind of topics. And then every year we also thought of, okay, what are kind of the new areas or things where we need to pay attention to from a security point of view. And then we noticed that the organization was moving from the traditional way of working to Agile, and also making the next move from Agile to DevOps. So we were used to think of security by design, security as part of the development process. So for me, it would be a logical step to, if we move from Agile to DevOps, then security needs to be part of that. But what I noticed is that the development teams and the organization was moving, but the security team wasn't paying attention yet to the new developments. So a logical first step for me was, okay, do a first assessment. What's the impact of this new development of becoming DevOps? And how should we kind of jump on that train? And then we started that journey. And in the end, there's a lot of information in the book, but that was a very exciting journey.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, and I think that a lot of the people who are in the call right now are kind of starting their journey or are at the beginning of that journey to really include security within their software delivery, software development. Ori, if I can ask you, you've likely started this way before now, of course, obviously because you're a part of one of the digital leaders in the book. What made you make that decision earlier than, let's say, now?
I would say for me, it's part of also the journey of the same company or the context that you are in within, right? So you need to make sure that the company, if you like, or the different parts of the company are ready for you to introduce it. That's probably the first stage, is identifying what is your context within it. Secondly, I guess, from my point of view, actually many companies already doing, whether it's, as you said, waterfall or DevOps, security is there, right? So eventually, if you look at the professionals there, they are not necessarily the CISO guys or the security people. They are actually brilliant IT people, developers, that already take care of security. They already care about it. And sometimes they need some more guidance. Sometimes they need some more tools. Sometimes it's only about standardization, making sure that we can unify it across the organization. And so that's, I would say, what led me also in the past, where I saw the opportunity as well to introduce that and to bring, all of that together and to find that alignment, if you like, between what you might do in different streams, and how does that eventually align with this kind of very detached, if you like, in some cases, CISO policy or information security policy, and how that, kind of orchestration works back and forth in alignment.
Yeah. And was there a specific trigger as well, Ori? Because I remember from my time when I helped organizations in implementing, security within DevOps, there was already things happening. Right? And security was being made part, not structurally, not with a blueprint. Was there a very specific trigger that you say, okay, now we have to tackle this, right, like a program or with a vision?
Yeah, so if I look a little bit on my journey, I guess there were a couple of different triggers to that in different companies or triggers in different contexts. One of them would be really identifying that some teams are starting to do, if you like, DevSecOps, but they're doing it separately, right? Yeah. And then it becomes a bit disconnected and it becomes, well, that's not exactly how we want to do it. And so in a way you see that the appetite is there, and that serves in a way in the appetite like, oh, this is great. Now we can leverage it and bring it in a unified way across everyone. And you have already this buy-in, if you like, from your key stakeholders.
You started to see the train moving.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be one. And second could be just actually identifying, if you like, a bit what's ahead of the curve. So you see what's your IT strategy or your business strategy. You say, well, we're going to be there in a few months or a few years. We better prepare for that. And so let's make sure that we have the right tools, the right skills and people in place so we can support that journey because we know already what's going to happen, kind of.
Awesome.
Right. And moving to France, for example, for a bit, do you have kind of a similar trigger that made you say a number of years ago, okay, and this is why we are going to do this right now?
Yeah, for a start, I agree, it's a journey, but there is a certain starting point. And when you look at your environment, the world in which we operate, then you see you have a certain risk profile. There's a threat landscape on your IT. You have an attack surface. And what you see in the operational environment is that there are a lot of bad guys out there. Yeah? A lot of bad guys from nation states, from organized crime groups. And there's a lot of pressure, a lot of security pressure on your organization. And in that journey, you recognize from the world where we operate is changing. And we have to go up that change. We have to pace with the bad guys. So there is more attention needed for security, for cybersecurity, and not only by the security teams, which already are in place, but furthermore there where it happens, at the DevOps teams. There is the software made The transitions, a lot of important work is done at those teams. So we have to guide those teams, we have to empower those teams and take them with us with the change we want to make. We have it about DevOps to DevSecOps, but what we saw, there was no DevOps without security. But the trigger from the operational environment, the risk, the threats, that was an important trigger to make a step up. We had to step up. That's the main thing.
Perfect.
All right, and then perhaps Tom, moving to you for a second, similar to what Frans said about empowering teams, I noticed in your part of the book that you also talk about advocating for security. Could you give the viewers a little bit of tips, like how did you start initially creating kind of that goodwill, if you will, on, hey, this is why we should be doing this?
Yeah, so in our company we have various DevOps teams that already, of course, follow the DevOps principle and DevOps cycle. But we also noticed that they were often asking security questions at the security department, like, hey, can we do this? Can we apply this or that technique? And we noticed that there's so much out there that they can apply that it was helpful to offer them kind of a framework in which we can bring all the various techniques that exist in a logical framework, because the DevOps cycle is, of course, used by different stakeholders, different roles, different functions use different elements of the DevOps cycle. And with using the framework and applying those techniques from the security landscape on the DevOps cycle, we can now very specifically highlight in which area, which method is valuable, which method is useful, and also make sure that the teams don't get overloaded with initiatives, overloaded with things they can apply, but really focus at their absorption capacity and apply the techniques that benefit them at that certain stage the most. So I think that's kind of how we applied it to them.
Yeah. So Tom, this is interesting what you're saying, and we saw that coming back multiple times during the interviews, right? So there's a logical order in what you can ask the DevOps teams to pick up in terms from security perspective. I just wanted to check with the other audiences whether this is something you recognize as well. Can you just put everything what you want the DevOps team to pick up from security at once, or do you need to do it in a specific order? And if so, what would that order be like?
Now, what I recognize is because you asked what's the trigger to really focus on DevSecOps, and what I saw is that first we started with SecOps, and then like multiple teams were starting with it, and I think that was also good. I think it also fits within the whole concept of agile and DevOps that they and every team tried a little bit in a different way to achieve their goals.
That experimentation.
And that experimentation, and we could learn basically from the first 5 teams. For me, the trigger was to getting more involved and getting more structure around it, and maybe a blueprint to standardize stuff. As if you're with 5 teams, then it's good to experiment. But if you envision that will be like 10 teams, will be 20, will be 50 teams, then you don't want 50 teams doing it all in a different way. It's not efficient, but it's also not, you cannot control it from a security point of view. So I don't think if it really matters the exact order, but I think it's good to have a phase of experimenting and also understand how do we help, for example, engineers, or where do we frustrate them. For example, if you introduce a new tool and you say everybody should use it in the full scope of the tool, and there are a lot of false positives and everybody is overloaded by that information, then it will not help your journey. But if you say we start small and learn from it and build on that, I think that is very helpful.
Yeah, maybe to build on that, I would say that probably the framework or the scenery you want to, the vision needs to be there in advance. So you would like to communicate it as soon as possible to how it's going to look like. And then to your point, maybe start small, or start, whether it's small in terms of teams or capabilities, to test it around also, right, to educate, but also you need to kind of ramp up the capabilities, whether it's within IT, whether it's in actually the business as well, because it's not just that isolated things in IT, as well as within the security team, right? So you need to make sure that you ramp that capability slowly, but everyone understands where that's headed, right? Exactly.
And I think that the point you make is very important. It's not only about educating the DevOps people, but I think that's also in my book, my chapter, it's also educating the security team on how does DevOps work, and how do you apply basically the security things you want to achieve in this DevOps way of working. And I also see that it works from both ways, and you can also learn from both ways.
Yeah.
All right. And Tom, how is this for you, for example? If we take the two examples we heard so far.
Yeah, I think we have that in the same way organized as they described. And we really look also to, we have this security support team that helps the various teams with integrating the techniques that we're proposing them. And we follow this PI planning sequence with like every quarter, we announce the new, or we pilot the new features that we want to have them apply to their software. So we really follow this staged process, so we don't onboard everything at once. Maybe the 5 best teams we look at first. And luckily in our teams, there's quite a good awareness of the security landscape and what they want to and apply themselves. And they reach out to us also with initiatives that they think are important to embed. So it's working both ways.
Yeah. Okay, great. And Frans?
There are a lot of DevOps engineers, there are a lot of teams. And what you see in practice, there is a difference in the level of maturity. There's a level in the number of capabilities. So, as a matter of fact, you have to see to the teams that are front runners. You can start with them. Mm-hmm. They are more mature, maybe more open to change. So I do not think there's one way to figure it out for everybody. You have to pay attention to the different people, to the different teams, mm-hmm. and then that they can make the step up to the level they want to achieve.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, and also what one of the big topics is in the book, is around scaling, and this I think something a lot of companies are currently struggling with. If we're to talk about, for example, a large company that wants to try their hand at scaling this, for example, Ori, what would be your first steps, advice to them?
Yeah, start small. Yeah, that would be the first, right? Start small and test it to get really the feedback from the ground. Mm-hmm. Already think in mind on automation and where you can also find business processes where you can consume your resources at the best, right? So if you find those processes where you can already inject yourself, right? So really this is secure by design, if you like, right? How can you make sure that security is already designed as part of anything else that is done, right? You don't necessarily need to introduce more. You can just inject yourself there. So that's definitely the second, and with that in mind, like how can you communicate them together and put them together in terms of automation and scaling up the people and making sure that you repeatedly check for that, like post check from the ground if that's moving in that direction.
Feedback loops.
Exactly, the feedback loop. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, and moving to Willem, you've talked in your chapter, for example, about pen testers, for discussing different types of feedback loops. What about pen testers was it for you that was that important in this approach?
Now, what I think is important that you, maybe to build a little bit on the discussion, is to empower the teams of doing as much as the security work themselves and getting also support from knowledge perspective, from tooling perspective, and also the governance around it. Mm-hmm. I think what helped in that journey was also you need to kind of trigger the developers, engineers, because they're really capable of finding solutions. But I think first they need to have also the security mindset. So they think normally in terms of use cases and getting things functionally working for the business. I think that's really important and needs to be faster and faster based on the demands of the marketplace. But I think if you can inspire them and trigger them also to think of more the abuse cases and the security mindset in it, then they can also be creative in finding those solutions. And the reason I like to get, for example, our ethical hackers or pen testers involved, they kind of speak easier the same language as the developers and can be inspired hiring, sometimes if they think, oh yeah, from headquarters, people with a CISO policy are just throwing this in my team and I need to fix it. That's not always working. But if you really go hand in hand with them, say, okay, let's look at your pipeline. Our pen testers try to find vulnerabilities and see where we can improve. Then they learn from that, and then we had a nice case at Achmea that somebody, by learning like how it works, came up with some really cool own vulnerabilities and ways to exploit it. Even that our vendors were surprised that we found it, but it was not a security guy; it was an engineer that just learned how it works.
Yeah. I think one thing that stuck with me during our interview, our conversation, Willem, was you also said, and this is something that I recognize within the industry, that technical people, DevOps engineers, IT engineers, they do often respect technical people more in advising them, or at least having that conversation. And pen testers in general are quite technical people compared to somebody that's writing policies, information security. They might have the knowledge, but not always have those interactions. So that's something that really stuck with me during the interview, that pen testers are more respected in that sense to have that conversation with them.
Yeah, and of course, it's not only that we use our pen testers to create that awareness, but it's definitely something. And in this case, it also worked the other way around, that they also understand better in what kind of environment do it. And actually, we also helped our pen test team to support them with some external experts that really guide them. Okay, what are the new things to look for with the pen testing mindset?
So to your point, that helps in empowering the others. I think that's really a key point, like this empowerment, that it cannot be something isolated for security people to drive. You can help cross the road a couple of times, but eventually you have very skilled people that they should drive security by themselves. So this empowerment and enablement is a huge...
And I think it's good to be a little bit humble also from a security point of view, because sometimes we tend to say we know it all, but if you walk in their shoes and understand also the complexity where engineers are working in, especially with also a lot of new technology, a lot of new frameworks where they work with. I think that helps.
Beautiful point. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Frans, I think you in your chapter also discussed empowering teams and goodwill as well. Aside from what we just discussed, are there any other techniques or initiatives that you've used to do this?
First of all, pen testing, red teaming, cyber testing is all very, very important, but sometimes is a little bit afterwards. What we did at APG, I'm really proud of. We have teams, and teams work together in value streams. And for every value stream, we implemented a health team. And a health team looks not only at security, but at the health of the IT landscape of that value stream. So security is a very important thing, but not the only thing. So in a health team, we have 7 specialties. It's of course security, but also architecture, IT management and infrastructure, life cycle management, risk, compliance, data, and maybe I forget one. And from those specialties, we give guidance to the teams, to the health teams. We guide them, we support them. We do not do their work, but we try to help them. We monitor them. We have dashboards. We call it the IT cockpit. The IT cockpit goes to the value stream managers, so they get the point of view of the health team about the health of their IT landscape. And it's important, I think, not just to drop security or architecture to the teams, but to guide them.
Yeah,
I guess that's what the book is about. The CISO's guide, but guide your teams and guide the value stream. That is really important. And we look more as a holistic view to those 7 aspects, not only security, but all the other aspects like life cycle management or architecture. Is important for a good security. So we look more from a holistic point, and that's our guidance. And that is what I wrote in the book. And maybe it's unique for APG, I don't know. Maybe other companies can implement that too. but it works. Just that.
Okay, thanks very
I think we have a bit a similar situation where we have also created hubs based upon people, their skill set. So there's like a data engineers hub, a software engineers hub. They come together and discuss like their daily work, what they're struggling with, where they need help with. But they also all have a representative in a larger board that also looks into our policies and kind of gives a vote for or against if we want to apply new techniques or tools. And in that way, there is a very logic way for them to funnel their thoughts, but also to have a say in what is changing. And on top of, if we make a change, for example, let's say we're going to apply a certain new technique, we even follow the DevOps cycle with the rollout of the technique. So we plan first, like, what are the requirements for this technique? Then in the code part, we actually write down how we are going to do this. In the build part, we match it against the other policies. Like, does it fit? Is how it should fit. Test phase, we pilot it with the team. What are the first response on what we're trying to apply? And in that way, we roll this DevOps cycle to get more and more knowledge from the teams, to adjust where we need to adjust it, and to even roll out in an agile way. So not force on top of them, but really get their feedback in the whole process. With those teams, with that alignment team. That's how we organize it.
So what I'm hearing, at least for the conversation of the last, I would say 7-8 minutes, is gaining the trust of the DevOps engineers to make that change happen is crucial, basically. And the way you do it to gain the trust is whether you have, your health check teams, or whether you run together with them in the DevOps cycles, advising them so there's more acceptance, or really, having technical people speaking to them. All these things are, I would say, methods to gain their trust. But it's very important to have their trust to be able to do that change that you want to bring across.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, I want to move to a slightly different topic, and this is one that we got from a lot of the audience that are hopefully watching as we speak, and that is around the topic of when is good enough, right? There's kind of a feeling out there with a number of the people that have joined that are saying, hey, we haven't been attacked yet, or at least not successfully. Is that because we've been lucky so far, or are we actually doing okay? Or if I might ask you to respond on this one, how do you know when good is good enough?
Maybe just put AI behind it.
Oh, let's not open that can of worms.
Sorry, I just needed to make that
Now
joke.
I won't say AI, yeah? We should ask ChatGPT, probably a good answer on that one. I'd say that, so I'm not a great believer in we're lucky. I think that good enough is when you have enough understanding and control. Control is also a big kind of term, but about where you are and what you do and do not have in place. And so I'm a great believer also in efficiency and also being really enabler for the business. So of course, right, you can have all the security controls in place and probably the business will not move in any place as it should. And so you need to find that balance, but as long as you understand what are the gaps and you understand where you have and where you don't have, the controls, or where you have deficiencies, then you're already in a good place, because then you can start making decisions. And those are decisions that are based on facts and not on a feeling that you're lucky or not. And I guess that would be my point of view. You don't need to have everything around your whatever CI/CD pipeline and yada yada yada. It's more about, do I know in general what's going on, and am I able to make decisions where I feel a bit that I need to improve myself or not, and also to check that also, right? Again, it's this feedback loop. Does it make sense to us? That would be my kind of North Star, if you like.
All right, thank you very much. And Willem, how is this for you?
Yeah, I think if I'm really honest, I think that as a security community, we're not very good in kind of measuring how effective is a security measure or what will it bring us. So if you look at some other domains, we're much better in quantifying these type of risks and make really logical decisions. So I think what we still need to do is deal with a lot of uncertainty. So uncertainty in terms of threats and also how can we be impacted. And I think also maybe how good are you today, but also going forward. So I think it's good to think of scenarios. So what could happen to us and can we permit ourselves to be vulnerable to these scenarios. And I think for me that's a good way of reasoning. Then you don't say I know it all and this is good and this is good enough. But I think if you develop the scenarios and come up with logical mitigations for these scenarios and also discuss that within your company to find, to use another difficult term, the risk appetite. But I think it's also how do we deal with uncertainty. I think that's a good approach.
Right. Yeah, I think it also speaks to the speed of Frans. You already mentioned like the bad guys out there. We are trying to improve constantly as a security community, but they out there are as well. How does this feel for you?
Yeah, for me, good is only good enough at the moment that you say it's good enough for this moment. But what about tomorrow or next week, next month, next quarter, next year? So your threat landscape is changing all the way. Thus, you are only good when you have continuous improvement, continuous change, continuous. You have to make the step up because you have to be in pace with the outside world, and the outside world is changing rapidly. There are always new threats, new risks, all this, and you have to monitor that. And I would say you're never good enough. You have to keep pace. You have to continue change and be better and faster. So there is no good enough, in my opinion. It's, I guess to say we are good enough is the beginning of the end.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, and what I also hear you say, there needs to be a balance between speed and security on the other hand.
Sure.
So you need to become faster as well. If I might move this to Tom, how would you try to keep those two in balance?
Who the two?
Speed and security, kind of.
That's a good one. How should keep them in balance? I think it's what previously mentioned. The risk appetite is very important to set the level to what extent you want to how you want to put the bar that is called good. I also think what earlier has been said, that having the right inventory of all your assets, all your risks, do your risk assessments and know what could possibly go wrong is very important to have there. Which speed to follow, that's, I think, very much dependent on the absorption capacity of your teams. If there's too much on their plate already, if there's too much change, it won't happen. You can push as hard as you want, but they won't adopt what you're trying to adopt. So I think that's also a factor that should be taken into account there. And I think it's very important that once you do those risk assessments, you have your inventory, you know your risk appetite, share that knowledge. Make sure that everyone can see the risks we're taking so they feel not part of the risk, but they feel a bit of responsibility to mitigate the risk or to be prepared or resilient for if something goes wrong. So don't make it an Excel sheet that one person keeps track of and shares once every quarter with the management. Make sure that people know what's going on, what could go wrong, so they are also prepared.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. All right. Well, moving on, earlier we kind of jokingly said something about AI, but still it is a question that lives in the community, and I think it was asked earlier in the chat as well, so I'm opening that can of worms anyway. Let's start with Willem, for example. What kind of applications would you see for AI? And I expect that ChatGPT is not necessarily the first thing we hopefully think of, but what applications do you see for AI in the DevSecOps field?
I think AI are constantly looking from two angles. So one is how can we leverage it from a business point of view? On the other hand is how can we use it as a security tool? And I think also how is it threatening us? Because what you call the bad guys are also using these technologies. So I think what I like, for example, I think Microsoft introduced a kind of a virtual assistant, I got the name, that could easily use all the data available in your environment, and then you could kind of ask questions about the security posture or the risk or the vulnerabilities. So I think that then you can definitely leverage the security data that's out there. I think in general, I think if we see the combination of data analysis and security, there's a lot we can improve and get more value out of that big amount of data that's available. And on the other hand, I think if I think of security and AI, it's more that if we set the right security parameters and we can ensure that, for example, AI stays within our companies, and not that the data, for example, you put in ChatGPT is going like to the tech companies, but if you can secure it and keep it privacy friendly, I think then the world will change so fast. I think then security is not a problem for now. Then there's a lot of other things.
There's a lot of opportunity as well, of course, to do it securely. Yeah. And very specifically in the field of, I think, Ori, you touched upon it, right? You said, always, whenever your starting point for your transformation towards DevSecOps or secure DevOps, ensure that you keep an eye on automation. You automate as much as possible. And I think AI does play a role in that one. Anything to add from, if you compare security automation with AI?
I think it's another application of it, if you like, right? I mean, AI probably helps you to scale faster, helps you to a certain extent, to do things you couldn't do just with automation. And being cautious that AI is a bit also misused, because any company that does an algorithm or two is now an AI company, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but when you really leverage that capability, then really, I mean, we're talking about masses of data, right? And we also try to, right, we have huge organizations with huge exposure.
Yeah.
And that means that there's a lot of data coming back to our teams, and we try to kind of, understand which is important, which is not, right? And so that helps eventually to take maybe some of that level already and say, okay, this is where you need to focus on, right? Yeah. This is what you really want to look at, and maybe, now you prioritize within your team. So I think that's where I say it's making the difference, and we're just seeing, I think, the tip of the iceberg. I think with generative AI, etc., we're going to see more of that. But at the same time, also, as you pointed out very correctly, I mean, also those bad guys, whatever, right? They're also using it already, right? So we see in both ends. And I think we will also see more, and we also need to be cautious of that, is how can we use AI, generative AI, etc., to look at our code and look at how we develop and then say, hey, how can I do it differently, and how can I do it more secure, and did I find anything, right? So it will help us to close that loop faster. And again, it's empowering our teams, not necessarily just the security teams. And then comes the question of privacy and data and making sure that you know to handle it in a way that doesn't expose also your own assets to whoever it is outside. So there's that aspect as well.
So looking at it as any other new sort of development with potential to do great things, but do it in a responsible way.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. And Ori, I think you in your chapter also talked about the concept of a platform security officer and how that helped you in your initial steps. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. And I think also in the chapter we talked about finally changing that name from an officer, but it sounded too much of an officer, right? And so actually today we're actually recruiting as well now for platform security leads, as we call it, product security leads. The concept in general is to create context also within the platforms, on the products. Happens in many cases that you have this kind of basket of security professionals, and then you have the different streams of products, etc., in IT. But then every time that you need to do a risk assessment or what's not, then there comes someone new from that basket, and they don't necessarily have the context, etc. And so by assigning a person from your CISO organization, security organization, to work hand in hand, really within the IT or the development teams, gives you that possibility to really embed security, really do security by design, shift left, whatever kind of cliche we want to use nowadays. Yeah, but it's really kind of putting security together, creating a relationship. It's a lot about trust and about enabling. And that position eventually, what it's, in my view, at least how I kind of try to also build it in that sense, is that it's able to get the feedback from the teams on the ground on what is missing, what do we need to also kind of be aware from this security organization at the top with the standards and the policies and all that kind of governance, and then be able to reflect and say, hey, we actually don't have all of that. And so, our architects needs to provide some more practical guidelines. And then also vice versa, right? If we have some new capabilities that we brought from the security perspective globally, sometimes you don't know it in the teams themselves, right? And so you're able to cascade it and to bring it to the teams in an efficient way. So it's kind of a back and forth, open conversation and improvement.
Okay, Thank you.
It's also like a comm person, right? Somebody that can help communicate between the internal world of security and security department towards the development world, and the other way around. Because sometimes we as security, we just too much focus. Okay, we have to protect ourselves against this threat, but we're not always listening enough to what our IT developers are basically, in need of, and that person that can translate.
Exactly, and they're part of that team, right? So they know exactly the difficulties, they know the people, and they're able to say, well, actually, this is not practical for us, so we need to look at something else, right? So it really helps with this collaboration.
I think we call them security ambassadors, maybe a better word than officer.
And so what I see usually, ambassadors are usually kind of more of the champions, right? So they are ambassadors for security, and in that sense, it's really security people. In a way, they are architects in many cases. That's where they come from. So they come from the ground. They come with the skills not to be the ambassadors for security, but they are really part of that security team. And then you can also have a side to that, or part of it, security champions or ambassadors program.
Maybe somebody online can suggest a great name. You can pick that up. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So what I'm also hearing in the discussion about security champions, security ambassadors, I think, Tom, that might be something that you've also touched upon together with Art. How would you approach creating kind of security awareness, security leaders, or security champions within development teams or within the development community? How would you go about that?
How we did it, I think, in our company is that we have a monthly day off. No, not a day off. That would be nice. There's one Friday a month that we call the Absent Friday, where everyone is supposed to spend the whole day on training, and but also give training to others. So we really invite people that have this security ambassador type of role, that are security experts, to present in a webinar style or to present a new tool or technique on that specific Friday. And since everyone is blocking the day off, we always can get like 20, 30 people that are motivated to learn about this new something in that session from a ambassador, and get inspired and start applying those techniques themselves. So we try to have this awareness training culture that's very open and very not forced at all on the people. So you can sign up for everything you want, but you can also present everything you want. So it's very low level, very much at the teams themselves. And I think that's kind of how we try to really spread that knowledge and make sure that people feel inspired or take up security knowledge from other teams.
Okay, thank you very much. And Frans, do you have something similar in terms of training people or creating awareness? How would you tackle this at APG?
Yeah, we have a security first program. From that program, we do a lot of security awareness, do the e-learnings. There's a security boot camp for 4 weeks. It is voluntary to do it, but almost the whole target group, about 900 people did the security first boot camp voluntary. So they learned a lot about security, etc. Then on top of that, we have the secure software development training, especially for people like DevOps engineers, etc. So we do a lot of awareness and training. But when I read the book, that gave me some ideas to make a next step, and I have an idea for the next step, and I'll bring that back to my organization, because it's a point of continuous learning, development. There is a lot of things that we can do extra on it to make the next step. And this book is really great. I've got fantastic ideas. I bring it with me to really make that step and get people enthusiastic to do that, because they voluntarily did the security first boot camps. Yeah. Maybe they will also the next program voluntary. It's better than when you force people to do it. Now it's another game for them. It is voluntary. So so that.
If I can make a bad joke, because it's, if you have somebody like Frans saying this is voluntary, it's hard to say no to him.
I am interested in this one, because you said that a target audience of about 900 people voluntarily did this.
Yes.
What do you think moved them that way?
Now, we do this with stakeholder management. Dus how do I reach 900 people at one time? That's very difficult. So we work with circles of influence. So, and with every circle, you reach more people. So we have, for example, people managers, value stream managers, people who we make enthusiastic for our security first program, and they are a kind of ambassadors for us to go to the teams. So it's not from the ivory
Tower.
So it is more with stakeholder management and ambassadors, and so we can spread the security message to all those people, and they voluntarily go into the program. So we make a big progress, and yeah, as I said, now it's time for the next step.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, what I'm kind of hearing also, combining what we heard earlier about pen testing and people speaking each other's language, perhaps that's what's happening here with those circles of influence, if I hear this correctly. So, and perhaps speaking about those next steps, I'd be curious, could you share one?
The idea of the champions is an idea I like, and we haven't a champion program. But I will take that with me to APG and tell about it, and let's see.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Perhaps moving on to one of the last general topics or general questions before we start rounding up a little bit. Because as I said, I expect that a lot of the audience is trying to understand the deeper implications of DevSecOps. If I could ask every one of you, what would be your biggest advice or your biggest learning, kind of the first step? Well, let's stick with the biggest learning for a bit. Willem, if I might ask you that first. Throughout your journey, what has been your biggest learning? What would you do differently next time?
Ooh, two questions.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest learning is also because we recognize that this was a domain where we need to make improvements and keeping the pace of the new developments moving to DevOps. But I think what I was really happy what we did is not try to reinvent the wheel that other companies already figured out. So I think if I would start over, I think still what I would do is try to use as much knowledge that's already out there by companies that are a little bit ahead of you. So in our case, on the one hand, we try to have that conversation with other companies, but also use some expertise, for example, to educate people within the DevOps team, but also educate people in the security team. For example, we did a pair pen test with a company that already had experience in doing pen testing in the DevOps domain, and so we could leverage that, but also on how to implement specific tools. So if I would do the journey at another company, I would definitely try to collect all that good knowledge, and I think the book can help, but also there's a lot of other ways to get that information.
Yeah, and Tom, I think one of the parts of your chapter together with Art was also like, hey, we've identified some things that we would like to do differently. Could you go a little bit into that? Without spoiling too much of the book, of course.
Yeah. So as soon as we started adopting the DevSecOps cycle, at least I was in the beginning primarily much focused on, can I do this myself? If I would have connected more with people that already have good knowledge or are very willing to help, it could have spread maybe faster and more efficient. And now recently we're working on a tech radar, for example, to have like technologies listed from adopt to hold. We are actively chasing those hubs and asking, like, do you want to contribute? And then we always pick like the top 3 people that shout the most, and then we get really good people on board to build the tech radar, roll it out, and have people motivated to follow what we are trying to achieve. So what I learned the most is that if I would have done that at the start, I would have been further now. But my network at the beginning was, of course, also smaller. So yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oli, how would that be for you? What is your biggest learning in the journey so far?
Well, what I mentioned is on the name, but I connect a lot to what you said. Right? Don't invent or reinvent the wheel. And I would say probably with an asterisk or a kind of caveat to that is also don't come with your own template and just try to enforce it on a new organization. So there's a lot to leverage of what's out there already, whether it's people, whether it's processes, etc., and technology. And so take the time to understand your business. It sounds like the obvious, but take the time to understand your business and understand how things are working, and then see how you can integrate yourself in a way that doesn't create too much of a change in a way, but does introduce that change that you look for.
And maybe identify also the people already very knowledgeable in the teams, because there are a lot of developers with a good security mindset, a lot of good security architects with security knowledge. So if you can start already with the good people you have, I think that will definitely help.
I can add, because I'm really triggered what Ori is saying over here. So this is, I was actually quite fortunate to be able, to be part of all the interviews, right? I could see a clear red line through all the interviews. If you ask me what does good look like, I think all the chapters talk about a blueprint, a end state of how you should do DevSecOps, right? And on scaling it on levels, governance, people, process, technology, it doesn't matter. But the way you navigate through your organization to get there is unique, because it really depends on the culture of the organization. That's why, or you would have approached it differently than Willem, than Tom or Frans. But I think that's the key takeaway, and I'm really liking that you're saying that. So that I would like to enforce that, like really understand your own organization context first before you start implementing something.
Yeah. It's kind of what we see in the DevOps world in general, I think, is that some people try to use a hammer for every problem, because then every problem starts looking like a nail. Which, what I'm hearing here, that doesn't work for security either. So
there is an end state, but it's not one size fits all in your journey.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Then finally, Frans, your biggest learning?
I fully agree with what is said in this table. But there's one thing I want to pick out of it. Sure, you have to change people, process, and technology. And when you will change the organization, you have to change the people's mindset. So the thing is, organizations do not learn what the people learn. So you have to give a lot of attention to the people. You have to take the people with you with the change that you want to make, from DevOps to DevSecOps, or maybe other changes. But it is not the organization that learn at other people. So you have to focus on the people. That is what I want to do on top of that.
Yeah, to me it sounds also what we often say during trainings or workshops is you don't change culture, but you can change behavior, and that in turn changes the organization or the culture in the organization. That's what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. All right. So we're nearing the end of the book launch, and once again, thank you very much for being here, of course, and once again, also congratulations with the book. I've read it. I think it's a brilliant piece of work. If there's one last message that you would like to give to the audience today, apart from, of course, read the book, which fair enough, what would that be? Starting with you, Tom.
That your staff is your most important asset, and that losing your staff can be worse than having a breach or something. Because in the end, their knowledge is what helps your company grow further.
Very nice said. Thank you. Willem?
Yeah, maybe related to that, I think what's crucial in the success of this journey is having the right knowledge and skills. And you cannot, if you have, for example, 50 teams, you cannot have that all in all the teams. So try to create kind of a center of where you combine that knowledge and maybe broader than only security in relation to what you said. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Ori?
So I very much relate to what you said about people. It's all about people, and also don't compromise. It also has to do, right? I mean, sometimes, especially in our field, it's you need to get people fast, and there's this competition. Yes. Also, take the time to find the right people. That will be that piece in the puzzle.
Okay. Thank you very much. Frans?
I will say, don't see it as a clean-cut transition from the state 1 to state B, but see it as a journey. And look at your organization, at your culture, because every organization is different, and see what's good to do for your organization. That is not a very transition from A to B, but make it a journey and look what's going on, and then take your next step.
Yeah, so really tweak it to your specific
situation.
Tweak
it specific for your own organization, because all organizations are different.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Right. And Irfan, how about you? What's your biggest takeaway for the audience?
Maybe not for the audience, for myself, but also for the people over here. Like,
Sure, yeah.
I'm very happy that I did this journey of writing a book. It was a lot of fun, meeting new people, getting a lot of great ideas, and bouncing off my own ideas as well. So for me, I think what I can conclude is there is opportunity for me to write the next book, I would say.
All right.
And then I'll come back and then ask you, Frans, you had these ideas, what is it that you built? And I will build on top of that. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I'm not going to give a content answer. The gentleman over here already gave that topic.
Perfect. All right. Then thank you very much, each and every one of you. I would say that this is nearing the end of the live stream for now. I hope you enjoyed it. Please read the book. Let us know what you think on every channel available. You can reach us on LinkedIn. I think still in Zoom will also be open. And the book will also be available digitally or physically soon. Apart from that, I think the last thing is to say, once again, congratulations on the book. And I hope everybody enjoys it as much as all of us have so far. Yeah. So thank you very much. This has been the live stream for the CISO's Guide to DevSecOps in the Enterprise. Thank you very much and see you next time.